everyone. This is Christina Barr, and you're watching Black Tea News. Hello. Welcome to Black Tea News. I'm host Christina Barr, and today we're going to be talking about some of this drama with Biden and Kamala. And it seems kind of like petty, small meat and potato stuff, but I told you guys how I get to it. But there's been so much talk about the SCOTUS stuff with Ketanji, and at least I've been talking about it a lot because I don't care if you guys or people out there are saying that other judges have made similar situations, lighter sentences. It doesn't make me feel better, especially when I listen to her reasoning regarding those things. So, but as I have been saying, I think that she's going to be confirmed. And as a matter of fact, Joe Manchin did come out and say that he was going to support her nomination. So unless every other Republican says that they're not going to do it, and you get like someone like Sinema who says, nah, I'm not cool with this, she's going to be confirmed. I don't like it, and I really don't like the rhetoric from the media. Like, I've talked about this and written an article about it, like how they want to paint everyone who has a concern about like her background and her sentencing as, I don't know, some kind of QAnon sort of complaint, or when Holly and other people, Ted Cruz or whatever, mention it, they're trying to appeal to a QAnon base or something. QAnon, they believe in, there's some weird stuff out there that they believe, but you can just be a normal person concerned about child pornography. So there's that. I also don't like the rhetoric where they're like, oh, how dare we have to listen to this and see a Black woman used in such a terrible sort of way. And I'm like, she's a grown woman. She's an adult. She has a record, and people are allowed to ask questions. I just replied to someone on Twitter who was like, oh, how like this is hard to watch, and why should we have to watch a Black woman be rated in this kind of way? And I'm like, they're not nearly as rough as they were with Republican nominees. And she has some things that she should have been better prepped on. I don't know what her people were doing. Holly pretty much let it be known in this Twitter thread the kind of questions he was going to ask. So there's no excuse for her not being better prepared. Maybe that was her preparedness. But her explanations, I didn't find very compelling. I was talking to someone after I got off the air yesterday, and she's talking about her explanation of there's some people who look at maybe not look at, but they try to access child pornography just to see what they can do with the technology, to see if that's something that they can accomplish, and they hold it. And this is someone who's like in the technology business, like, you know, who could, I guess, hack if he wanted to or whatever. He's like, that doesn't make any sense. He's like, because you're not going to be bragging in your buddies like, hey, I scored some kitty porn or something. They're going to think that's weird and gross and report you to the police. Like, you'd be like, yeah, I got these passwords from this big security firm or something. Like, that would be more something of a thing that you would brag on. So even like some of the things that her reasoning and explanations, which I was willing to listen to, ultimately didn't make a lot of sense. And the Washington Post even like caught up on one of the cases that were highlighted with the 18-year-old who got 3 months, and apparently he's still into child pornography, I guess. That's still something that he still seeks out to this day. According to their fact check, at least I think maybe when they looked it up, it was like 2019. So T-Post Millennial picked up that story from the Washington Post. I'll go through it a little bit, but there's all that stuff plus the what is a woman, and people act like that's such a weird talking point, or it's in bad faith, or it's just a gotcha moment. And it's a really simple question, and it should a really simple answer. And if you can't define what a woman is, if it doesn't mean anything, I guess, then what does it matter that she's the first black woman to do all these things? So it's a little bit of a frustrating time for me regarding all this, because I'm like, I don't think Cruz and Holly and some of these other Republicans on the Senate Judiciary Committee are like all lockstep about their tactics and what they'll ask and what they'll talk about. So if the Republicans were going to make a hubbubaloo of about all this stuff, um, then I really wish they would have been on their game as far as really trying to stop the nomination. And in my Michigan area, it's not like we're turning on seeing ads and saying, don't, call your senator, vote no, because at least I know that there's no way that they're ever going to get like the two that we have here to probably vote no on these things. I don't know what it's like in West Virginia. I tried to call a relative of mine who lives in Arizona before the show started to kind of see what it's like out there. But I it if this was just like a hey, make your base upset thing and not try to sort of really actually stop this, that upsets me too. um I really wanted to see if they could maybe pull some magic. And I told you guys from jump, like, she's probably going to get confirmed. And I never suspected that maybe she wouldn't be confirmed. But again, I think some of this stuff is really troubling, because the woman thing, it at least shows that she's dedicated to being an activist. Like, there's all these people saying she's so qualified. She does have credentials. I'll give her that. But all of us, whether in your public sector or private sector, we're all aware that sometimes there are people that we know in positions of power that we're like, how did they get there, or they don't have the best judgment. So just the fact that someone has a really good resume isn't where you begin and end hiring someone, right? That's not where you begin and you end it. You actually have to interview them. So this is like the process with the asking the questions, looking over her resume, her record, and so on, and doing and they've done background checks, and so this is all part of the process. Just because someone looks like they have, a good background in their career, and I have no doubt that she's, worked hard to get there and accomplish a lot of different things, but that on paper, that doesn't mean that you should be able to get a lifetime appointment to the Supreme Court, because at the end of the day, her judgment is in question, not merely her resume. And I think there's reasons to be concerned about her judgment. There was already a bit of concern anyway, because some of the cases that she ruled on ended up getting kicked back down, or overturned rather. So that question's like, so did you not make the right call then? And you were like erring more toward the side of activism rather than what was legal, because upper courts viewed it as you got it wrong. So now she's going to be going up a level where, she basically will have the final say, when there were times and she had different rulings when it was a good thing there was someone else in the next level to shoot her down. So that's a thing too. And then the woman thing, we have different sort of titles where you can't, there's obviously a difference between men and women. And Marsha Blackburn, I know there's a lot of play from the clip about, can you define a woman? But she also asked, like, do you agree that there's a difference between men and women, as Ginsburg described? And she's like, I don't know the context of that. Or like, do you need context to know whether or not there's a biological difference between men and women? What, you need context for that? Like, seriously? Well, I don't know. I'm not a biologist. I guess she, So if you're willing to throw out all sorts of reason and logic for the sake of wokeness, because again, she could have been like, well, there's all these cases that are coming down, I don't want to hint at what I would rule or whatever. That's not what she did. She didn't give that kind of answer. And I'm not saying that's the right kind of answer to have all the time, but that's not the answer she gave. She answered, I'm not a biologist. With the when does life begin? She's like, I don't know. So she didn't have good answers on that. So I don't know who prepped her. I'm assuming it would be some people who worked with her through the White House or something. But it just goes to show you how incompetent, just in general, this administration has been. That she wasn't more kind of prepared for that. So I mean, I definitely feel like Republicans got some good gotcha moments, but there's some Republicans who don't like the tactics or whatever the other Republicans did, and felt like some of it was grandstanding. I'm going to say that some of it wasn't, maybe some grandstanding, but I think it's important for us to know, and reveals a lot, that she won't define what a woman is. I'm not surprised she wouldn't touch the live question. I'm a little surprised how bad she botched it. But again, I don't feel that she had good explanations as to her record. And since we're on the subject, I know I'm like not going the normal route with like my here's a funny meme, but I might as well just get this out the way. So Post Millennial wrote this article referencing another article from the Washington Post about the pedophile sentenced to 3 months by Ketanji Brown Jackson continued to seek out sexually arousing images of teen boys. It has been revealed that the defendant in the case United States versus Hawkins, who has been in the center of the Supreme Court nominee Ketanji Brown Jackson's confirmation hearing due to the low sentencing delivered by the judge, continued to seek out child pornography during his probation time. In 2013, then 19-year-old Wesley Hawkins was sentenced to 3 months for child pornography, a sentence that has repeatedly been blasted by Senate Republicans during the course of Jackson's confirmation hearing for being too low given to the content of the images and videos he possessed, according to the Washington Post. In 2012, Hawkins came to the attention of law enforcement after he had posted 5 videos of prepubescent engaged in sexual acts to YouTube. So he didn't just have it, he uploaded it somewhere. An undercover detective I think it's a typo. Undercover detective soon after emailed an undercover agent, I guess, detected it soon after he emailed the 18-year-old, suggested that the two had similar interests. So he trapped him right there. Authorities executed a search warrant in June of that year, discovering 17 videos and 16 images of young boys on Hawkins' laptop and phone. According to the Daily Mail, Hawkins had also uploaded 36 images and videos of child pornography to his iCloud account. There were videos of 11 and 12-year-olds committing sexual acts, a video of an 11-year-old being raped by an adult male, a video of an 8-year-old committing a sexual act, to name a few, the Daily Mail wrote. Federal guidelines called for an 8 to 10-year sentence for the crime, citing Hawkins' age and lack of criminal record. Prosecutors recommended a 2-year sentence. A U.S. probation officer recommended just a year and a half. Hawkins' defense, though, asked for far lower than any of these amounts, just 1 day in jail, home detention, and 5 years of supervised release, according to the Washington Post. The attorney said that Hawkins was not dangerous, had sexual identity issue complicated by his mother's strict religious beliefs, and that his offense was prompted by teenage sexual drive, not an intrinsic sexual attraction to significantly younger children, the paper wrote. Yeah, just blame it on the crazy Christian, not... Then federal district court judge for D.C. Jackson said that Hawkins had committed a very serious and in many ways heinous crime, one that capitalizes on victimization of the most vulnerable members of our society. I cannot even express adequately how horrifying it is for me to know that somewhere out there are children who are being trapped and molested and raped for the viewing pleasure of people like yourself. So at least she said that. Jackson, though, seemed persuaded by some of the defense's arguments as well as her own review, noting that Hawkins had not produced the videos or photos, rather exchanged ones found online. Addressing Hawkins, she said, "You were only involved in this for a few months, and that other than your engagement and undercover officer, there isn't an indication that you were in any online communities to advance your collecting behavior." okay, but he obviously was starting that process, I guess. Jackson also placed weight on the relative age of those Hawkins was viewing in comparison to the defendant, saying most child pornography offenders are middle-aged adults who are deviants drawn to pictures of vulnerable children. This case different because the children in the photos and videos you collected were not much younger than you. This seems to be a situation in which you were fascinated by sexual images evolving in what were essentially your peers. According to the Daily Mail, Jonathan Jeffries, Hawkins' lawyer, submitted a psychologist evaluation to the court determining that Hawkins did not demonstrate sexual deviation, but rather was driven to child porn as a way for him to explore his curiosity about homosexual activity and connect with his emotional peers. Um, he was older than the stuff he was looking at, so that emotional peers thing is gross and inaccurate. In a handwritten letter sent to Jackson just 3 days before sentencing, Hawkins expressed his regret and hoped Jackson would give him a second chance. I cannot say how much regret that I have done. I have disappointed everyone in my family and everyone who has ever cared about me. I hope that I can make up for my mistakes and that this will not end my life before it starts, the letter stated. Hawkins' case and short sentencing have been slammed by Republican senators, including Josh Hawley, who called the sentence a slap on the wrist. Senator Tom Cotton cited a 2019 court order from Jackson requiring that Hawkins enter a halfway house for the last 6 months of his 6-year term of supervision. The order reiterated earlier terms of his supervision that the computer and his property were subject to search at any time and added a condition of the computer monitoring software. The Washington Post wrote, noting that the underlining request for the order had been sealed. In reference to the order, Cotton asked Jackson in the Senate hearing, "What did Wesley Hawkins do in 2019, Judge?" And she said, "I don't remember." Jackson replied, "You know what I think? I think he got caught with child pornography again, and he wouldn't have it if he wouldn't have if he were in prison the 8 to 10 years the guidelines called for," Cotton said. A person familiar with Hawkins' case read to the Post the probation office request that led to Jackson's order, according to Washington Post, who noted that the person spoke on terms of um, anonymity because they were not authorized to discuss it publicly. While the probation office did not allege that Hawkins committed any new sexual offenses or violations in his sentencing condition, it stated that despite being in treatment for more than 5 years, Hawkins, who would be around 25 at this time, continues to seek out sexually arousing non-pornographic material and images of males 13 to 16 years old. So, yeah. And so when she was like on the sentencing commission, I was reading through some collected like reports and stuff, and there were experts who were she had this idea that if you weren't in it very long, then you weren't going to be dangerous or anything, and someone may have a lot of stuff, but may not necessarily be into it, I guess. And then there were experts who were like, what people can do bad things even if they just have like a one time viewing, and she thought maybe if you just have a collection, but that doesn't mean you necessarily have viewed it or whatever. I guess back to the people collect stuff for technology, and the experts were like, now if they collect it for a while, most of these people collect it over time, and this young man was he may be young because Jackson was like, well, most people who do this stuff is older than him, but he was doing it over time, and that's some pretty heinous stuff that he had. And again, this isn't the only case, but this is one that people are really talking about because there's 3 months, which I assume his age had a lot to do with what her eventually her sentence came to be. But the experts, push back on some of the things that Jackson thought, but then the sentencing commission, when they wrote their kind of key findings, they did leave some of that stuff out. So, um, she had weird views back in college about sexual predators and stuff. So I don't feel good about this, guys. And again, I don't think there's a way that's going. I'd be surprised if she didn't get confirmed at this point. But it it really annoys me though, because I mean, obviously Biden picked her because she's black. And I'm not saying she doesn't have any other qualifications, but let's be for real. She was picked. She wouldn't have been considered if she were not a black woman. Like the Biden, that's a campaign promise. Even though Biden has filibustered black women in the past, even though he did what he did to Clarence Thomas, he wanted his pats on the back, so he made this campaign promise and so on. So and I don't say that to say, hey, she doesn't have any sort of credentials. She does. I don't like some of the things about her record. I don't like some of the things I'm getting from her ideology. I don't like that she seems like a lot of like an activist. I don't like those things, but I'm not gonna say she's not accomplished. But everyone is expecting everyone to be all excited and happy because she's going to be the first black woman on the Supreme Court. And I'm just like, I think black women deserve better and can do better than Ketanji. And I know that's going to upset a lot of people. But people are expecting people like me to be very excited about it, and I'm like, well, she doesn't even know she can't even define a woman. So how am I supposed to be excited that she's a black woman? What is that? Well, gender is a construct, and CRT says race is a construct too. So they're both constructs. And then what does it matter? Why is it special? I know why it's special. They just don't want to be honest with you. Katanya just doesn't want to be honest and upset the wrong sort of people. That's why she wouldn't answer a very simple question that kids can answer about what a woman is. And Winsome Sears won in Virginia not too long ago, and that was a pretty exciting moment, especially if you're on the right and they turned it red just all across the state in retaliation from some of the crazy leftist stuff that had really just gone too far. And Winsome Sears gave a great speech, just someone who'd really come far, and is like, I can't remember exactly what she said, but she's like, we own the water fountains, kind of like, screw you, racism. We're living in a different age where people can succeed. And I really thought that was a better way to look at stuff rather than with the Ketanji situation is we're going to rig the system to make this accomplishment happen, when Winsome's accomplishment was like, I'm going to make my own moment, and we can look back and see how far that we've come. And I think that's a better way that society should be progressing rather than Winsome Sears is a result of equal opportunity, and Ketanji is the result of equity. And I don't like equity. Equity is like when you have to Frankenstein your way into some kind of result that you want, but in trying to be inclusive and get her on the bench, but did Biden not discriminate against all men? Did he not discriminate against Asians and Hispanic people and white people? He did. And again, I'm not saying that she doesn't have credentials or qualifications. Obviously, not every black woman would have been considered for that kind of position. So again, I don't want to knock her accomplishments, though I am not fond of her record. But she has accomplished a lot, and she has a lot to be proud of. It is unfortunate that Biden announced that and made it about race and made it about gender. He could have just like internally been like, yeah, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to nominate a black woman instead of making it a campaign promise. So when people act like it's not about race, it's not about her gender, I think Senator Hirono mentioned something like that. It's like, they want us to believe you're here just because you're black. And it's like, that's what your president said. That's what your president said. It's not only because she's black, but she wouldn't be there if she weren't. So on the flip side, these people want me to act like that is so monumentally important. But if it was someone who had my bent as far as ideology, Winsome Sears, she got Michael Eric Dyson said a black mouth is moving, but white supremacist ideas are coming through. So they want you to have faith and hope in that black people can succeed, but they don't want you to know that people who don't think like them can succeed either. When Larry Elder was running for governor of California, I was listening to an interview. I think I listened to the whole thing, but he was talking to several different newspapers. And he was talking about why there aren't more black people who vote Democrat, or why the conservative message is just so monumentally suppressed. And he brought up different magazines that were very prevalent in the black community, like Jet and Ebony. I maybe he specifically mentioned Jet, but he talked about how they'd have different accomplished black people in the magazines and they'd feature them. And he said, but you never really saw them go out of their way to really highlight someone of the conservative mindset. And I think it was Ebony magazine in 20, maybe it was 2018. They covered like, oh, look at all these black people running for office. And people were like, none of these people are Republican. So they got a lot of flack for it. So they were like, here's a part two. And they ended up like doing, like, here's all the Republicans. Um, but it was just really shady. It was really shady. And you can say, well, they always plan to do a part two, like, but they didn't announce the first part as this is a 2-part series. They announced it as here's all the black Democrats running. They said here's black people running for office, because a lot of these people have an agenda over being pro-black. So they can celebrate it all they want, but again, I think America could do better than what we have. But even so, I was talking to somebody the other day and they're like, it could have been worse. I'm like, oh gosh, I guess. Like, is that what we should put on our tombstone one day? Like, Ketanji Jackson, it could have been worse. Could have been worse. So again, I'm pretty sure she's going to get confirmed. Joe Manchin said that he was going to vote for her, and I think Collins and Murkowski still might do it. Mitt Romney might vote for her too. I'm hearing rumblings and stuff, so she might get bipartisan support. And I still think a lot of the things they brought up during the hearing I wouldn't be comfortable with, and I if there are Republicans that vote, I'm still gonna be disappointed. With that, even if it's like people that I don't normally rely on, like Murkowski and Collins and Romney as well, especially if Romney does that, man. But we'll see. We'll see. We'll see. I'm pretty sure she's getting through. I'm pretty sure she's getting through. Um, Yeah, I didn't mean to quite go off on that whole sort of tangent. I didn't even like encourage you guys to go to my website, blacktnews.com. Check out different content that I have on there, the website. If you enjoy what I do, please consider leaving a donation at blacktnews.com/donate. Please check out different merchandise that I have available on the website. Like, well, I do have different books that you guys can check out. I got Black Tea mug. I got the You Are Not That Special mug. I got those also in t-shirts. I got the goat hoodies and t-shirts as well. I'm working on some really good merch right now. I was working on that before I started the show, and I wanted to get it done before I went live, but you guys can catch that stuff this weekend. I got some really cool stuff that you guys are probably going to want, so just stay up to date on the info at the website. Make sure you're following me across all my social media platforms on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, Getter, etc. All my handles are at Black Tea News, black like the color, tea like the drink, and new then the news. Not the news, but Black Tea News. The only one that's different is Twitter. That one is at True Black Tea. I do want to thank Brighter Mission Pack. I'm in their studio as always. If I said something today that triggers you, nobody cares. I'm just glad that they like to uplift conservative voices, and I really do appreciate being in their studio. I got some really good news today. I can't quite share with you guys yet because it's not 100% solidified, but I'm excited. So you can prepare your happiness before I spill the beans to you. But I did have some good news today, so that's all cool and good. I did have a meme that I wanted to show you guys as well. This is from oh gosh, this isn't one that's going to make you happy, I'm afraid. Not in the least bit. So This is from George Alexopoulos, and it's some kids, and they're around like in each other's bedroom with the flashlights, and there saying if you say gay, they're gonna come for you, and they're like, no, that's not true, it can't be. And so it's kind of like the movie like Candyman or something. If you say like it in the mirror 5 times, they'll come for you and stuff. So they say gay, gay, gay in the mirror, and then this guy pops up to take the kids. So if you're unaware of where that comes from, I'm really sorry to have to show you and talk to you guys about that. But once upon a time, I think it was just this maybe the summer of last year, there was a gay man's choir that sang a song about how they're coming for your children. And the song was like, we'll convert your children. And the main guy singing for a good chunk of it, that's what he looked like. So that's a nice throwback from him. But here's just a little blip if you weren't aware of the song.
We're coming for them. We're coming for your children. We're coming for them. We're coming for them. We're coming for your children. We're coming for them. Your children will care about fairness and justice for others.
Yeah, so yeah, that concerned a lot of people that came out, and they're like, oh, it's just a joke, and they're like, yeah, it wasn't a joke, man. That's knock knock is a joke. Knock knock is a joke. Singing about coming for people's kids, bruh, I don't think so. I do not think so. So I hope that's a moment there was quite a few parents red pilled, and I saw some people make TikToks like, when was the moment that people knew that they needed the Florida bill? They're like, they started playing some of that video. So since we're on the topic, Ron DeSantis did mention the other day why some books, they want to ban from libraries. Warning, this is pretty graphic, but hey, I guess this is that kind of show today.
Unfortunately, we've seen some books in some of these libraries. I mean, you're talking about kids in middle school. Some of the stuff that has ended up there, incredibly disturbing stuff. You have some groups that want to take away classic books like To Kill a Mockingbird, but they want things like Gender Queer, a Memoir, which is a cartoon-style book with graphic images of children performing sexual acts. That is wrong. That has no place in the schools. They want to eliminate Of Mice and Men, but Lawn Boy, a book containing explicit passages of pedophilia, is somehow accepted as being okay. Parents want education for their kids. They're not interested in indoctrination through the school system. And that's where
Yeah, so I've seen some really creepy books that parents have found and pointed out. I went through one with you guys on this program about this way older looking child and this younger looking child, and they both look kind of mannish to me, but they're both from the art. It took me like forever reading. I had to read a few times to even understand what was happening. But they're both girls, but one had a really short butchy cut, and it was just really short, and they were staying over, the smaller child was staying over the bigger child's house, and they got in bed together, and I guess they were having a sleepover, and then the smaller girl admitted that she thought she was a boy, and the other person was like, I'm glad you told me, and they're like, it's okay, and they're like, I think they said I love you, and then they started kissing in the bed together, and I'm like, and this was like in an elementary library, and I'm like, oh, leave the gender confusion aside for a second. I would definitely freak out about that. If I were a parent and found a book in an elementary library that depicted kids together, even if they were the opposite sex, in a bed making out, it's not okay. It's not okay, and I would not want that in people's heads. Man, my parents never let me go to like a sleepover because you don't know what can happen outside of parental supervision and stuff. So man, people got some weird views today. People have some really, really, really weird views today. And I showed I talked about it yesterday how Democrats actually in Florida, most of them actually support this "Don't Say Gay" bill, which is the parental rights and education bill. And they were just like, "Hey, do you think you should be teaching sexual orientation?" They didn't even mention the gender stuff in the question, and people are like, "No, that's crazy." And so it was 52% said, "Yeah, I agree with the bill." Still a maybe high and alarming amount of people on the Democrat side was like, "No, that should be fine." But still, these are Democrat primary voters. So the whole world hasn't gone insane. And I know we run into crazy people on TikTok and Twitter and all these apps. And there's gay men choirs from San Francisco or wherever who sing "We're Coming for Your Children." But the entire world is not like that. So we have to make sure that we just remember to be brave enough to say, "Hey, I'm a normal person." And another normal person say, "I'm also a normal person." And the loud minority can know that they are wacko weirdos in the minority, and hopefully the Democrat Party, for example, will be like, "You know what, we have to stop entertaining the really, really fringe nutty part of our base, because they are a small portion and we're about to lose a lot." But I don't think they're there yet. There was an opinion piece in I think it was I can't remember if it was Political or New York Times that was talking about basically this mindset and this attitude with the Democrats, and they keep giving so much to this small minority fringe, active and loud people, but they're scaring off people who've been, blue dog Democrats for a minute, and who consider themselves more moderate. Um, but you know what? I'll never forget, and I've told the story a few times, but when I was watching the 2016, maybe it was still 2015, maybe debates, and you had Hillary and you had Bernie, of course, and there was a mayor or something of who taxed the rain. I can't remember his name. I did like hit pieces on him. I can't remember the name, but there was Jim something, and he said they were asking like, "Who's your number one enemy?" And Jim Webb, I think that's his name, if I'm not mistaken. I'm looking it up right now. I think it's, yep, Jim Webb. So Jim Webb waited for his turn. Hillary Clinton was like, "Oh, the Republicans and blah blah blah," but she had a list of different people who was her enemy. And then other people were like, "The NRA, blah 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 blah," and they're getting all the applause and whatnot. And Jim Webb's he's just waiting, so excited to tell a story. He's like, "I would say the person who threw a grenade at me, but they didn't live to tell the tale." And I was watching it in a room full of other Republicans, because we were watching the Democrat debate, like live tweeting, like, "Oh, Democrat sex, etc., blah blah blah." And so we heard that, we're like, "Yes, like that's amazing. The answer's amazing, yeah." And it just was like a dud. It was a total dud in the audience, in the room, and like he immediately dropped out and was just like, "This isn't like the party that I remember, or this is like, I'm like not what they want, or like they're going in a different direction." As he like immediately dropped out, because at that point, I guess until that moment, he didn't realize how out of touch he was with the direction of where the party was going. And there was some really crazy stuff that started popping up, and a lot of, like, especially on college campuses. If you've been following some of the attitudes that people have had on college campuses for a while, you probably aren't surprised by a lot of stuff that's coming that's bearing fruit right now. And a lot of these people who the media kind of dismiss, like, oh, they'll grow out of it. They didn't grow out of it. Now they're lawyers. They're probation officers. They're prosecutors. They're DAs. They're teachers. They're counselors and psychologists and social workers and but no one just kind of gave him like a, hey, this is how reality is. No one said, hey, we're gonna have to do some critical thinking. Hey, I'm not just gonna allow you to just, I don't know, formulate your own unicorn nonsense to existence, because that's not how the real world works. And they were just brats when you would confront them with any sort of reality. And Ben Shapiro had to confront a lot of these people. A lot of people from the Daily Wire. Dave Rubin, I watched when he would go on campuses, people act crazy. When Milo Yiannopoulos was still like a big thing. There was one time he went to a school and they were like, and like there was actual like fire and violence and kind of rioting, and people just really never grew out of that. And there are newsrooms too, a lot of activist journalism. So I hope people catch a clue, but because I really don't want the world to be so nutty, and I don't want people to feel too intimidated, like Katandri, to say, hey, a woman is just an adult female. It's really that simple. And by the way, the memes have been glorious. I've posted quite a few on my like Facebook and retweets. I'm on like Twitter and stuff. So the memes are nice. I'm still sad about the reality that regardless of what we do, she's probably going to be a Supreme Court justice. I mean, I do recommend that people call their senators and so on and tell them to vote no. But the memes are at least funny. At least we can laugh at the memes. We'll always have our memes. Going back to Florida for a second, just briefly, I want to talk about that. There's a fake news story about how Ron DeSantis was kicked out of this investment convention or conference or something because of his anti-immigrant speeches or views or whatever. Turns out he was never scheduled to speak. So since he was never scheduled to speak, how could he be kicked out of the conference or whatever? And they could have very well. There was a Miami Herald who, I guess, spread that story around. They could have very well just, I don't know, contacted the government, the governor's office to make sure that did happen or didn't happen. And so anyway, they wrote a story about it, and it had to end up being debunked by his spokesperson. Which, by the way, they put it on their site and they ended up updating it later instead of like taking it down. So it really seems like they really want misinformation to spread, even though that they know a story may be fake. It doesn't really matter because they would just rather have this narrative like, oh, people really hate DeSantis and people are standing up to him, and that's why he's not invited to speak at this convention. He was never invited to speak scheduled in the first place. So it's just like a total made up fake story. Total made up fake story. And after the story was even debunked, Politico, I believe, ended up picking it up. I think it was Politico, but it was a main stream site and people are just like, this has already been debunked. So they are so desperate to hate on this man. He's gonna like wipe the floor with anyone who wants to run against him. By the way, his spokesperson I don't know if they actually, I think maybe they have put up billboards, but she has her Twitter background is a picture of like, because people start making gay billboards in Florida, even people like out of state paying for it. And so the billboard says, say Governor Ron DeSantis is the best governor in America or something like that. And so that's her background right now. So I think it's funny how they handle the media and the press. They hate him because he can handle them pretty well and he's not afraid to tussle with them. And when he was running for governor, they tried to do some pretty nasty smears on him, especially since he was running against a black man, and man, Gillum, they are so lucky that he did not end up as the governor. They just dodged such a major bullet. It's hilarious. It's scary if to think about for them and stuff, but it's just because he ended up found one day in a hotel with naked men and drugs and stuff. So there's that. I mean, there's other things, but there's that. That seems like a pretty big one. So thank God for you guys that you got Ron DeSantis, but they didn't like that Trump was willing to fight back and could deal with the press well. And Ron DeSantis learned very fast to deal with these people who are extraordinarily hostile toward him. And Republicans have to learn that the media, a lot of these people just want to hate on them, and there's nothing that they can do. I feel like sometimes people like Mitt and so on still want to be like, please like me, please like the please clap kind of moment. But they feel that way about the media, and they'll applaud you when you do something against like Trump or like the mainstream base or something like that. But their love is so, I don't even want to say, I was going to say fickle, but it's not really fickle. Like we know how they operate. We know how they operate. I don't know. He's just like the girl who didn't get picked for prom and has all these insecurity issues, I guess. That's what it comes off to me. And someone who's a governor and so on, should just really have, I don't know, more backbone than that, it seems, in my opinion. Okay, I want to talk about this Kamala Harris story. It's pretty funny, in my opinion. So Kamala Harris apparently was upset back in the day because of this Vanity Fair, this Vogue cover, because she's in her Chucks here, and according to AIDS, because there's this book that came out, and I guess they're spilling some tea. I think there's a couple different AIDS spilling tea, but they said Harris was wounded. She felt belittled by the magazine, asking AIDS, would Vogue depict another world leader this way? So, you're on the cover of Vogue, and they were going for relatable, which she's lucky that anyone even tried to go that route with her, because she's just the worst. She wears Chucks and pearls, and that's a part of her branding that people have really liked and tried to paint her as relatable and cool or whatever. So and when during the inauguration day, there are people who are wearing pearls and stuff like all across the country. I don't like her, but there are people very excited that a woman of color got to her position, and they were trying to emulate something that she does and how she wears and how she dresses. And everyone's like, oh, I'm so excited to have my pearls and stuff. So the pearls and the Chucks thing, that's something that they have deemed that she has made iconic. And so to be so upset and feel so wounded, like that was disrespectful. They were really trying to play to that sort of image. And she's not a first lady, she's a VP. It's kind of a different sort of thing. And it's not like they treat her like they're treated Melania, where designers are like, I wouldn't design for her, and Melania's wardrobe and everything, so obviously she's like a model. Her wardrobe was just stunning. But little things she did, people just treated her so unfairly. Kamala Harris is actually insufferable. Melania was not insufferable. They just wanted to hate her. Kamala is insufferable. And to complain that her cover of Vogue had Chucks and pearls, like, did she put them on her feet? And she posed for the cover. She could have been like, no, I don't. I don't want to do that. Did she not have agency during the entire time that she was there? And so people were like, dude, this is first world problems. So it's really not that big of a deal. Kamala Harris has had a lot of different issues. Tina Flournoy, who would become Harris's chief of staff, reached out to the Biden campaign about the perceived slight and was caught off guard by the anger at the Harris circle. Political reported the Biden advisor allegedly told Flournoy that this was not the time to be going to war with the Vogue over a comparatively trivial aesthetic issue. The book said, according to Politico. Tina, the advisor, said these are first world problems. The book excerpts also show early tension between Biden and Harris offices in the early days of the administration, including early disagreements about the vice president's role in the administration's foreign policy. Harris's team had wanted her to oversee relations with Nordic countries, which were considered low-risk diplomatic assets. The White House aides rejected the idea and privately mocked it. The excerpt said, according to Politico, more irritating to Biden aides was when they learned the vice president wanted to plan a major speech to outline her view of foreign policy. Biden aides vetoed the idea. Later, the excerpt said Harris was reassigned to the assignment of taking the lead with Central American countries Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador amid soaring migration across the U.S. border to Mexico. Harris wanted to avoid the label border czar and blamed Biden for categorizing her assignment as being related to immigration. So she failed. They all failed spectacularly with the border. It's still like a hot mess. Then there's so many crises under the Biden administration that it's hard to focus on all of them at the same time. But the border situation never got fixed. It's still pretty bad. It's still pretty bad. By the way, I don't know if you guys caught this, but Biden mentioned the other day that there's gonna be food shortages. Just wanted to let you know. That sounds bad. But you know what? I remember back in the day, and I'm sure he's complaining this all with the war and other stuff like that. But I'm sure supply chains and all that stuff compounds the issue. But when the lockdowns first started, there was an article that was like, lockdowns will lead to a worldwide hunger. And I'm like, oh, well, that sounds like we shouldn't lock down. No one seemed to care. I cared. I'm like, I think this will be a long-term problem here. I think we should pay attention to that. But no, people still really wanted to lock down regardless. So there's that. Last thing I want to share with you guys before I clock out for the day is this video that was on The View the other day about since the CRT conversation came up during the hearings, and Sunny from The View has just said some. I mean, they're all like awful, but she's just so insufferable in this clip, and I just wanted to share it
for 2-year-olds.
Critical
Like, it doesn't
race
make
theory
sense.
is a Harvard law class. It's a Harvard discipline that was started by Derek Bell. There's a troll, remind me in my ear of his name.
Christopher Rufo.
Christopher Rufo, who decided that he was going to call African-American history and the history of this country critical race theory. And people like you have bought into it. And
But I don't think all the
shame.
parents that are opposing what we saw in Virginia, what we're seeing in San Francisco, one of the most liberal cities, is that the reason it's hitting the left and the right is there's something that's being missed, which is excused every time someone says it's not CRT.
And we have to acknowledge that parents are asking to be involved in this conversation, and that's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
So we should allow them to have space to talk at the table with their children.
Shouldn't
we all
parents-
have children, and we understand how
Shouldn't
important that
parents
is.
want to normalize discussions about race and racism?
For sure, but it should be their choice to decide. And there you
So when she's like, it seems like you fell for that, I was like, flip the table. No, I wouldn't have done The View, but I wanted to sit there and took that on my. I would have been like, no, we need a couple more minutes in this segment because I'm about to light her on fire. So Chris Rufo, if you don't follow him, he's been really pushing the anti-CRT stuff, and he's made it very clear he wants people to hear that phrase and totally associate it with toxic ideology, and he's done a very good job. Most people have Democrats still are like trying to uphold it or whatever and protect it, but overall people think negatively if you break it down by races and stuff. Most people think very poorly of CRT, and they really don't want a lot of this stuff taught in schools, but Democrats are very adamant about dying on this hill. But you know, Beto O'Rourke actually said something a couple weeks ago about how he didn't think it should be taught in school. So maybe there's some people trying to catch on. I understand he's trying to win the governor race in Texas, of all places. But he was just the worst. But if he can catch on, I think other people can catch on, but we'll see what happens. but it is being taught in schools, and Chris Rufo has really highlighted how it's not just in schools, how it's in corporate media, it's in TV, it's in a lot of different places. And if you don't follow him on Twitter or are on his email list, you're really missing out, and you should follow Chris Rufo, like I do. So calling him just a troll when he's way more informed and intelligent about this situation than Sunny is. Sunny is either misinformed or she's being dishonest when he's not saying that learning about Black history is CRT. That's not what CRT is. Anyone who believes that CRT is about teaching sort of any honest history, that's just absolutely not true. As a matter of fact, in critical race theory and introduction, it talks about how it, unlike other academic disciplines, it requires an activist dimension to it, and they do have a goal of transforming the world. And she did mention it was a practice in law, it was something you learn in law school. That's where it started. But if you were trying to transform the world, would you wait until a child maybe graduated high school, maybe went to college, and then maybe went to law school to learn about this? Or would you be an activist and incorporate it in different acts of life, which is what they do? I mean, there was and I mentioned this before, but one of the people, she mentioned Derek Bell. Derek Bell's not the only person associated with CRT. You have Kimberly Crenshaw, but she went on Joy Reid's and she's like, I'd know if it was taught in schools. So she was lying, because she's been a part of workshops and stuff where they teach about critical race theory insights and how they do incorporate it in schools. And here's another one too, something else that she was a part of. So they know that this stuff is being incorporated in schools. Do they do like all the vast breakdowns that you'd have? No, but they do want to teach people pretty much basic watered down tenets of critical race theory. And you can't really deny that. As a matter of fact, the Detroit superintendent, I live in Michigan. Detroit is a very big city. He said that they purposely incorporate critical race theory into their curriculum, and not just like in history, but in literature and other sort of subjects. So it is something that people are openly saying that they do want in schools and have purposely incorporated it within schools. And I don't know if all the people who are deciding to do that know what it all entails. But they're pushing it. They're pushing it. And again, it's not just in your schools. A lot of this stuff is also bleeding into corporate America. Earlier this week, we talked about, I think Disney mentioned some of their Reimagine Tomorrow stuff. Maybe that was last week we talked about it. When you had Coca-Cola's Be Less White, that was stuff from like White Fragility, which is a spinoff of that stuff. So a lot of like this Ibrahim Kendi, like being anti-racist and White Fragility, that stuff is offshoots, like spinoffs of CRT. Like people think it's getting more criticism now, so people don't want to claim that as critical race theory, but they do, like in the writings, they do mention that how there are all like spinoffs and stuff of it. But if you just look at CRT itself, it's pretty bad stuff. Like I was arguing with someone who was a white person, and they were arguing with me about critical race theory and so on. I'm like, do you agree with the tenets? And they said yes. And for me, how we were just having a conversation to that point, I figured they didn't know really much about it, but they said yes, they agreed with the tenets. I'm like, okay, why are you arguing with a black person? Why are you arguing with a person of color? Because they think that like the black voice is more important. You know, a person of color, their voice is more important than a white person. So I'm like, just listen and affirm me. And I'm like, and if you believe that in all the tenets, you agree with them, then you think that racism is like our everyday occurrence, is just baked into the cake. We just live in a racist society, that the society benefits white people over me. And white people really don't have an incentive to change that. So I think you're admitting that you're racist. You can't say that you don't have implicit bias, right? And you may say you're an ally, but how can I legitimately trust you? So they didn't like that, but it is a racist ideology. And so you got to know what you're supporting, at least like the foundations of it. You don't have to read everything, but those are pretty much those are the tenets of it, and along with like race as a construct and other stuff too. But yeah, those are the basics. There's stuff that's far more complicated than that, but yeah, that's the gist. And there was a very, very viral video, and I've played it before, But if a father was talking about critical race theory, he's like, if you believe in critical race theory, you're believing a lie. He's like, because you've lived your life in the real world, and it just doesn't correlate to what you know, how you've lived your life. And I'm like, that's a great way to put it, because the stuff that I mentioned, you may agree with some of it, but is that your worldview that you like? Even all these people who are like such allies and stuff, do they really believe that they are racist and that they don't want to make the world a better place and they don't have any incentive to actually change that? Really? There's this one person who's I'm friends with on TikTok, but they used to be a leftist, but they 2020 was like really bad for them and they were deep into it too, but at the same time they were like, I have to keep saying I'm a racist, but I don't really feel like I am a racist. And so I was so glad to hear that, because I'm like, because it really puzzled me living in that time and just all these people like confessing their white guilt and their privilege and admitting that they're racist, but they're working on it. And I'm like, this is really upsetting me, especially when I see people that I went to high school with like confessing this stuff. And I'm like, do you guys really just felt like you were more privileged than I was? Were you racist the whole entire time that I knew you, or are you just saying this stuff now for clout? Because all are bad. All this stuff is bad. So it was just really infuriating watching all these people lose their minds. So it was at least someone confessed, like, you know what, I had questions about this, and I didn't really think I was racist. I just felt like I needed to say that. Like so amazing. The world was so amazing. In a bad way, in a bad way. But I hope we're turning a corner. I hope we're turning a corner. So to Sunny on The View, you should have Chris on your show. You should have Chris on your show. If not Chris, heck, I'll go on. And we can talk about CRT. And Sunny should know better, I think, but I don't know. They say the dumbest stuff on The View, so I don't know if she's lying or she's just uninformed. Both are. It's probably both at the same time, guys. I'm not sure. But anyway, that is the show for today. I thank you guys for watching. Please go blacktnews.com. Check out different content that I have on the website. Please share different articles. Check out different merch that I got here. Like the black tea mug here that I got. I'm Not the Victim You're Looking For. I voted for President Trump and all I got was historic peace deals, border security, energy independence, low unemployment, gas prices under $2, no new wars, a tax cut, and this lousy t-shirt. Also got Denounce White Supremacy, Defeat Joe Biden, with a list of racist stuff on the back that he said. And I also have different books that I have. I have not one nonfiction book called Slay Your Fear, How to Overcome a Spirit of Fear. I wrote this during COVID, and I wish to God that people had listened. It's not only about COVID, it's just about fear in general and how you're supposed to overcome it and not let it rule your life. And if you do, people will take advantage of you. And certainly that's what happened. But I also do have a lot of fiction books, like this historical fiction fantasy book. And I'm so grateful to people who have decided to buy my books, whether it's on paperback or Kindle, or people who are reading through it on Kindle Unlimited. If you have that, if you're subscribed to Kindle Unlimited, as long as you pay for, I guess, a monthly fee or whatever, you can read, X amount of books or whatever. And as long as you are flipping the page, yes, I do get paid for that. So thank you to everyone. And for those who've left nice reviews. So thank you guys for watching, and I will see you next time.